My name is Eliza. I was adopted when I was a baby. That's the story they always told me. Like it was some kind of reason for why I was different, for why I never fit in. But it wasn't just that. It was the way Ronald looked at me, like I wasn't really his, even though I was supposed to be. Grace tried her best to make up for it. She'd call me her sweetheart and tell me how lucky she was to have me. But even when she tried, it never felt like enough. Ronald, he didn't see me. Not in the way a father should. He never said I was good enough, never cared about the things that mattered to me. When I got straight A's, I'd sit at the kitchen table, waiting for him to notice. Instead, he'd sit there with his newspaper, his mind elsewhere. When I started getting into high school and tried talking to him about the little things, the friends I had, the guys I liked, he just stared at me like I was invisible. Birthdays were the worst. Grace would try so hard, making me feel like I mattered, but Ronald wouldn't even remember. I'd come downstairs in the morning, and the only thing on the table would be his unread paper. No cards, no hugs, nothing. I wasn't his daughter. I never felt like I was. So I stopped hoping. I stopped waiting for him to change. I learned to take care of myself. Because the truth was, no matter how hard I tried, I knew Ronald didn't want me. And that realization, it was painful. But it was also freeing. It made me stronger than I ever thought I could be. The silence in our house was heavy, like a thick blanket no one could shake off. Grace would hum in the kitchen, the sound of her warmth filling the space. But Ronald? He'd sit there, his face unreadable, a quiet storm that never spoke. I hated that silence. It was louder than any words he could have said. When I was younger, I thought maybe I was just imagining it. Maybe I was too sensitive, too needy. But as I got older, it became clear. Ronald had no interest in me. He wasn't angry with me. He was indifferent. It was the worst kind of rejection because you could never fight it. There was no reason to argue, no fight to win. Just this empty space where a father's love should have been. I remember one night when I was about 12. I had made this huge poster for my science fair project, and I was so excited to show him. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd finally take notice. I put it on the kitchen counter, right in front of his paper. His eyes flickered over it for a second, then back to the headlines. "Nice job," he muttered. But he didn't look at me. He didn't really see me. I think that was the moment I stopped expecting him to care. I realized that I could be perfect, straight A's, top of my class. And it wouldn't matter. It was like I was invisible. I didn't fit into his world. And no amount of trying to be the daughter he never wanted would change that. It was a quiet kind of pain. The kind that stays with you. A constant ache that didn't have a name, but I felt it every single day. By the time I hit high school, I stopped waiting for Ronald to see me. I learned to survive without needing his approval, because I knew it would never come. Grace, bless her, did her best to fill the gaps. But there was only so much she could do when the one person who was supposed to love me unconditionally refused to. I needed to escape that house, that suffocating silence. So I found a part-time job waiting tables at a local diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And every dollar I earned was proof that I didn't need anyone to survive. Not Ronald, not anyone. I worked late nights, sometimes on school nights, picking up extra shifts when I could. The customers were rude, the tips were small, and the hours stretched longer than I ever wanted them to. But I did it. I didn't do it for anyone's praise. I didn't care about that anymore. I did it because it gave me something to hold on to. Something that was entirely mine. A small taste of freedom. When the other girls in my class spent their weekends at parties or shopping, I spent mine cleaning up spilled coffee and clearing empty plates. I was learning the art of resilience without realizing it, and slowly, quietly I started saving. Every dollar was a step away from a house where I wasn't wanted. Every dollar was a piece of the future I could build on my own. I wasn't looking for validation. I didn't expect Ronald to notice. I didn't expect anyone to care. I was just trying to get out of the cage I'd been living in for years. I was becoming someone else. Someone who didn't need him to define her. It was the bills that did it. One by one, they piled up like a mountain we could never climb. I could hear the soft rustle of them as they sat on the kitchen counter, unopened and ignored. Grace tried to pretend it wasn't happening, like if she could just smile enough, everything would be okay. But I saw the worry in her eyes. I heard the tremor in her voice when she tried to pay for groceries with a credit card that was already maxed out. Then came the eviction notice. I saw Ronald hold it in his hands. His knuckles white, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like his teeth might shatter. The man who'd been silent for so long finally spoke, but not in the way I expected. He was panicking, desperate. But he wasn't going to ask for help. Not from anyone. Not even Grace, who was on her knees trying to figure out how to make the rent. And definitely not from me. His pride, he carried it like a heavy burden, always in the way, always suffocating any chance of real connection. He would rather lose everything than admit we needed help. And there I was, watching as the storm brewed, knowing that if something didn't change, we were all going to be swallowed by it. That night, after the fighting had died down and Grace was in her room, crying quietly as she always did when she was overwhelmed, I knew I had to do something. I didn't want to. I didn't want to give him anything, especially not after everything. But I knew I had to. For Grace. For myself. For us. So I slipped into the night and placed the envelope on the kitchen table. The one with all the money I'd worked for. The $5,000 that I had saved, every penny of it earned by serving rude customers and missing meals. I knew it wouldn't fix everything. But maybe, just maybe, it would make him see me. The envelope sat there on the kitchen table, an unspoken challenge. In the middle of our broken home, I didn't wait around to see Ronald's reaction. I couldn't. I knew if I stayed, I'd hear the words that had always been there, unsaid, but heavy between us. The silence that had defined us for so long. Instead, I left the kitchen quietly, not wanting to disturb Grace, who was tucked away in her room. She never asked me about money. She never made me feel guilty for not asking for more, for not sharing what I could. But I knew. We both knew. I didn't want Ronald to feel like I was trying to save him. It wasn't about saving him. It was about showing him something, maybe for the first time, that I wasn't some burden he had to shoulder, that I could be strong, that I could take care of things, that I was capable of giving him something he needed when he had so little to offer me in return. That night, I went to bed early, curling up with the weight of what I had done pressing heavily on my chest. I didn't expect thanks. I didn't expect a transformation. It was just the only thing I could do to keep us afloat. But I couldn't erase the feeling that I had given him something more than money. I had given him a glimpse of what family meant to me, of what he should have been. The thing he never saw. The thing that had been sitting there all along. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of silence again. But this time, it was different. Ronald didn't say anything, but I knew something had shifted. I didn't know how or why, but it was there. And for the first time, I felt like he was seeing me, not just the girl in the house, but the woman who had stood up and said enough. It was the quiet that told me everything. Ronald didn't shout, didn't scream in anger or relief. He didn't even thank me. He just sat there at the kitchen table, the envelope in front of him, and for the first time in my life, I saw him really look at something. Or maybe, for the first time, I saw him truly look at me. I was already in the living room when I heard the rustling of the paper. I didn't move. I knew he'd opened it. I could hear the way his hands shook as he sifted through the money. The sound of it wasn't just coins or bills. It was a moment unraveling. The years of distance between us collapsing with every breath he took. I wasn't there to see it, but I could picture the moment in my mind. Ronald, the man who had always refused to show emotion, sitting in front of me like a broken shell of the father I never had. His shoulders trembled as he stared at the money, and I could almost hear the sharp intake of breath. I could imagine the weight of it, the realization that his daughter, the girl he had dismissed and ignored for so long, had done something bigger than he'd ever expected. I didn't expect an apology. I didn't expect anything except the same, cold indifference I had grown used to. But then, there was a sound I didn't recognize, a soft, painful sob. I stayed in the living room, still and quiet, not wanting to intrude. But the moment dragged on, too long for him to hide. Finally, I heard his voice crack. All these years, you were right here, he whispered to himself, his words barely audible. And I never saw you, never treated you like my daughter. His voice broke in a way I hadn't thought possible. And then, something unexpected. He stood up, walked toward me, and without saying another word, wrapped his arms around me. A hug, a real hug. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because he finally understood what family was. It wasn't like the hugs I'd seen in movies, where everything magically healed in a single embrace. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even expected. But it was real. When his arms wrapped around me, I froze. I didn't know how to react at first. For so long I had wished for this, but now that it was happening, I didn't know if I could let myself feel it. The years of silence, the rejection, it had all built up, and for a moment I thought I might break. But I didn't. I stayed still, breathing in the strange warmth of his embrace. My father's arms finally holding me the way I had always needed. And in that space between us, where the years of hurt had settled, something shifted. I felt his breath against my hair, and I realized he wasn't just holding me to say sorry. He was holding me because for the first time in his life, he saw me. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My heart was pounding in my chest, and all I could do was breathe. My mind kept replaying the moments when I'd waited for this, every birthday, every milestone, every little moment where I needed a father to notice me. But now that it was here, I felt like I could finally breathe. It didn't erase the hurt, but it softened it. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. His arms loosened, and I pulled back, just enough to look at him. His eyes were wet, something that wasn't supposed to come from someone like him. "You don't need to say anything," I whispered, my voice breaking before I could finish the sentence. "I've heard enough." He nodded, his gaze falling to the floor. His shame was palpable, but I didn't need him to explain. The hug was enough. It was a bridge, a small, fragile one, but it was there, and for the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. The hug was a beginning, not an end. It was like opening a door that had been locked for years, only to realize that the space beyond it was messy, uncomfortable, and full of things we hadn't dealt with. But I stepped through, anyway, because, for once, I was willing to see where this could lead. For days after, there was an awkwardness between us. Neither of us knew what to say. Ronald didn't know how to make up for all the years he had ignored me, and I didn't know how to let go of the anger I had buried so deep inside. He tried, though. He really did. He started doing things that felt foreign to both of us, asking about my day, complimenting me when I finished a project, even asking about my friends. Small things. But they meant something. I could see the effort in his eyes, the way he struggled to reach for something he hadn't known how to give. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But the air between us had shifted. It was no longer the heavy silence that had once filled every room we shared. There was a tentative peace, fragile but present. Grace noticed, of course. She saw how I was no longer looking at him with that mixture of resentment and longing. And she saw how Ronald was trying to be more, to be better. She didn't push us. She let us find our way. And I started opening up, slowly at first. I told Ronald about the small things that had bothered me, how I used to sit in the kitchen, waiting for him to see me, and how the silence had crushed me. It wasn't about blame anymore, it was about healing, about letting him know that his absence had hurt, but that I was ready to move past it. I don't need you to be perfect, I told him one evening, after we sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee together. I just need you to be here, to show up. He nodded, his face soft with something I hadn't seen before. Guilt, yes, but also regret. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of understanding. Trust was never something I had with Ronald. It wasn't just the silence. It was the years of rejection, the feeling that I was never enough for him to care. When he reached out to me after the hug, I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he meant it when he said he'd change. But old habits die hard, and every time he looked at me, I was waiting for him to slip back into the father I had known. A stranger in my own home. It wasn't easy, not by a long shot. There were moments when I'd catch him watching me, and I'd feel that old tension creeping back, that fear that maybe this was just a moment of weakness for him, and soon he'd return to the man who'd dismissed me for so many years. But he didn't. Slowly, cautiously, he kept trying. He asked about my plans for the future, my goals, like he actually cared. He even started offering advice. Awkward, clumsy advice. But it was better than nothing. We started talking more, and when I said something funny, he would laugh. Not the strained kind of laugh he used to force, but a real one. And when I shared my frustrations about school or work, he listened. Not like he was just passing time, but like he was actually hearing me for the first time. There were still moments of doubt, still that little voice in the back of my head that wondered if it was all just an act. But little by little, I began to see the change in him. The emptiness in his eyes started to fade, replaced by a spark of something I hadn't known was there. Hope and trust. It wasn't immediate. It didn't come all at once. But it began to take root in the small things, the way he showed up for me in ways he hadn't before, the way he took responsibility for his past mistakes. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough for me to believe that maybe this time he really meant it. It wasn't like a fairy tale. There were no grand declarations, no instant fix to all the years of hurt. But something had shifted in our house. The silence had finally broken, replaced by a quiet understanding that wasn't forced. Ronald showed up for me when it counted, at my high school graduation, sitting in the crowd, his hands clapping with a smile that was awkward but sincere. I glanced at him in the sea of faces, and for the first time, I didn't feel the sting of disappointment. It wasn't that I needed him to be proud of me. It was that he was finally there. That, in itself, was enough. After the ceremony, he pulled me aside, his voice low but clear. "You did good, kid. I should have been there more. I should have been better." I didn't need him to say anything else. It was the first time he'd ever said something like that, and it meant more than any apology could. I didn't hold on to the pain anymore. I couldn't. I had built a life that was mine, full of strength and independence, things that didn't rely on Ronald's approval. But I also had something I hadn't had before. An understanding between us. A peace. He was trying and I was learning to forgive. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't an outsider in my own family. We were still figuring it out, but we were doing it together. There would be bumps along the way, of course. No one heals overnight. But in that moment, as I stood beside my father, I felt something I never thought I'd feel: hope, not just for me, but for us.